What made you quit a job on the spot? At 17, I was a young line cook at an upscale Italian restaurant. I was picking everything up so quickly that I knew all the stations on the line within 10 months of hiring. I was getting minimum wage, at the time $7.25 per hour, and asked for a $1 raise to reflect my diverse capabilities. Got denied and asked the chef when I could get it then. She said, "You're too young for a raise, just be happy with minimum wage." In response I said I may have to start looking elsewhere for a job who'll pay me what I'm worth. She then said, "Don't you know how expendable cooks are? If you leave I can replace you on the spot." So I did. A Sunday evening dinner service, very busy. At the height of the night I and my friend who I got hired took off our aprons and walked off the line towards the front door. He came with me in solidarity, plus I was his ride home. Felt good for a day or two, but I've never quit that way ever since. Been in the service industry for 23 years now. My first job in high school was washing dishes at a pub. I got it so I could buy my girlfriend a necklace that she wanted as a Christmas present. Come New Year's Eve they decided to put one person on dishes for a packed evening. I was quickly inundated. Close at 10 p.m. and at 11 p.m. I'm still doing dishes and this fat jerk chef is watching me laughing about how I'm not gonna be able to spend the New Year moment with my little girlfriend. I just said I just remembered I don't need to do this and walked out of that place and never went back. I'll never know that freedom again. Total opposite, but it's still a good story in my opinion. I worked at a very dysfunctional family-owned company. They put me on probation because the family member, my boss, in charge of IT convinced everyone else he was a genius and could do no wrong, so whenever something happened bad related to IT he'd just blame his underlings and everyone in power agreed with him. A few weeks later when I got the dream job I have now, I said in the exit interview one of the main reasons I was leaving was because I was tired of being on probation for 3+ months. They'd actually taken me off probation but never told me. I still would have left regardless, but the fact that they never got around to saying hey we're not about to fire you blows my mind. I had a very stressful job and was expected to answer Slack messages from my boss at any time, or I would be fired. He was in a different time zone so often I would be woken up at 3 a.m. being yelled at to do something. One day in the office, he was talking crap about me on Slack and accidentally posted it to a channel I was in. I was killing myself for this guy and he didn't even appreciate it. I packed up and left, best thing I've ever done. Owner pulled an unloaded gun on us during training to prepare us for armed robbery. My first job was working as a dishwasher at a seafood place. I wasn't hired as a dishwasher, I was supposed to be a busboy. They just shoved me on the washer and left me there. One of the other employees there was an elderly man who worked alongside his wife and grandson. Every day he would find an excuse to walk up close to me and put his hand on my butt. He was a 70-year-old man, and I was a 16-year-old boy. I should have reported him, but I doubted anyone would have believed me since he'd been there for years and I had only been working for a month. I just called the manager, told her I had to quit for school reasons and never looked back. Worked at a restaurant as a server. We just catered a large wedding reception. The owner's wife was chatting with the wedding party all night and occasionally getting the drinks. At the end of the night she said she's taking her share of the tips since she helped so much. I say fine even though that's illegal in our state. An hour and a half after the party ends the restaurant is still a mess and the owner's wife is just standing around talking while I was supposed to clean up. It was almost midnight and I'd worked my other job earlier that day. I walked out without saying a word. They ended up giving me all of my tips on my last check. I was hired to do payroll and accounts at a small welding/engineering firm. Entering the timesheets and checking them against rosters and I realized that the tightwad owner had been shorting employees almost 3 hours each week by not paying them for toolbox talks and all that stuff. Printed the proof, told the boys in the workshop, and walked straight out. Emailed the resignation from my car. I had worked for a cleaning company and I had a total disaster of a person named Tina as my manager for about 4 months. Tina would work the night shift with the crew and basically did nothing. She would leave the majority the work for me to do during the day when it was a lot harder to do as I had my own list of duties as well as whatever she left for me from her own list. I was teetering on the edge of quitting but I hadn't found a replacement when one day I got a call from head office that Tina had quit and for about a month the job was exceptionally better and I effectively was my own boss. Things were going remarkably smooth again for about a month when I got a text message from Tina asking me to do a bunch of extra stuff. I called the owner and they told me that Tina had approached them about coming back and that they were rehiring her in her former position, and I literally just packed up and walked out about an hour into my shift. I had zero intention of working another minute for that woman and held to it. The debt relief law firm I worked for stole $19,000 in incentives for a young family that was in distress and losing their home. It was soaked up in bogus attorney fees and high-fived about in the office. I had a boss scream, "This is a dictatorship and I'm the dictator," in a meeting while slamming his fist on the desk. I was 16 working part-time in an island in Greece and a guy walked in with a knife and demanded to give him the money from the register. I obviously did it and immediately called my boss. He told me that I was a wuss and should have stood up for myself, so I just left without even replying. Had a job where the people were toxic, the management was mostly toxic, and the other techs made themselves look better by making other techs look bad. I had 2 guys on my shift who would go behind me during maintenance or repairs and undo stuff I did and call it out over the radio for all to hear, so I started recording myself making the repairs, and when I got called out and showed the video, I was told "You're not supposed to have your phone out on the floor," and got wrote up. I walked out with no warning in the middle of the busiest weeks of the year, leaving them short-handed with only 2 idiots to handle calls. I got blamed for something that wasn't my fault, was in an argument with our VP or marketing because I had the audacity to suggest a solution that would have avoided our problem instead of accepting fault for something I didn't do. He told me he doesn't pay me to think, so that was my last day. Not me, but a middle-aged tradesman where I work. I work underground and it isn't for everybody, terrible environment and whatnot. This particular individual starting working and after a few weeks decided that it wasn't for him. Bad conditions and hostile supervisor. He approached the boss at the morning meeting and told him that he wasn't going underground and that he was quitting. The boss told him that he had to give him 2 weeks notice, and without missing a beat the guy replied, "For the next 2 weeks you're gonna notice that I'm not here," turned around, packed his stuff and left. Was never heard from again. My older in age boss didn't understand how an Excel spreadsheet worked. Fresh out of graduate school, I did some calculations for him as he requested, printed them out, and he proceeded to freak out on me because I didn't do them by hand. Yelling, he berated me in front of everyone in the office, took my water glass and threw it against a wall, breaking it to pieces. Then a co-worker who looked over my work said everything was done correctly. I applied for a new job after work that day where I've worked for over 7 years now. I can deal with lots of garbage, but I'm not dealing with a boss that has the emotional capacity of a 2-year-old. I worked for a placement agency at a manufacturing facility. I had worked 7 of my 8-hour day when one of the supervisors came by to ask anyone on the crew I was on if they would stay for another 4 hours. We all looked at each other and politely declined. They came back one more time to ask, and again, we declined. Then they came back and demanded that one of us stay behind for the 4-hour shift or all of us were going to be written up for attendance. This pissed everyone off, but because we were work placement instead of employees, we were unsure who to talk to. Some of the other crew told the supervisor they can't because they have to pick up their kids, etc. When the supervisor left, the crew had multiple people saying they can't get written up again or they would lose their job. I had scheduled a dinner with my in-laws, so I called the husband and told him the situation and that I would stay. Told the crew, "I'll stay, don't worry." Told the supervisor, got put on another crew that had work for 1 hour but was required to stay for the full 4 hours. Next day, I called the main office and explained the situation. They said they had a representative on site due to this manufacturer being such a large client. Called the on-site representative, and explained the situation. Was told they have a lot of attendance issues. Again, explained I had never had attendance issues and everyone on my crew was threatened with being written up for not staying 4 hours after their scheduled shift. On-site representative still defended the actions of the supervisor and threw attitude at me. Fine, I don't need you, I quit. And that's the story of how I learned about my workers' rights and workplace harassment. When I was 16, I was a busboy off the books. Made $250 a week working 35 hours a week because they paid per day as opposed to per hour. Manager comes to me and says they're restructuring how the pay scale is and said he wanted me to work less days, same amount of hours but for half the pay. I made him repeat to me his plan, and once he confirmed it I said give me my money for the week because I'm leaving. I am a physician assistant and took a job at an urgent care. After working there for about a month I noticed some irregularities, such as some medications being expired and sometimes a lack of supplies. I wrote that off as the office manager not being as astute as she should have been and brought it up to the doctor who owned the place. He said he would talk to her and straighten it out. Then one of the medical assistants came to me and said, "You know this has been going on forever, right?" She then said that things would never change and to get used to it because the expired medications had been on the shelf for months and they were told to never throw them out. She then also told me that the autoclave, the machine that sterilizes instruments, was broken and all they did was wash the instruments in soap and water and put them in the autoclave anyway to get them as clean as possible. That was the end of that. I made out a formal complaint to the state medical board and never showed up again. The state actually came in the very next day and raided the place. They shut him down immediately. They found so many things wrong that not only did they keep the place out of business, they suspended his license. He was also prosecuted on federal charges because he was running a scam for truck driver physical exams. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. We used to get a free McDouble or hot and spicy with a small fries and drink for our lunch break. One day when I went on break the franchise owner was there and when he noticed I asked for cheese on the hot and spicy he attempted to make me pay for the whole meal because cheese wasn't free. I thought he was joking so I laughed and started walking towards the break room until he yelled at me not to walk away from him in front of customers and my co-workers. I couldn't believe it, this grown successful businessman was hounding a 16-year-old for a slice of cheese. Told him I wasn't gonna pay, put the food down and walked out. They tried calling me to come to work that weekend, I told them no thanks and never went back.